Hey, how's it going, everybody? Scott Spreitzer here with the Mall Shaw. We're DocSports.com's Against the Spread, and we're talking Week 9 NFL, Week 10 college football. I mean, the season in college football already more than halfway over. It's crazy, but we're going to break it down. 7 games, 4 in college, 3 in the NFL, like always. And we'll kick things off by telling everybody, especially those of you who are new to the show, if you see the banner at the top of your screen there, get a free $60 account. If you're not yet a member at DocSports.com and want to give it a trial run, that's what that's all about. You click on the link below the video, you get yourself set up for the free $60 account, and then you can use those free $60 on any of mine or any of Amal Shaw's daily packages over on our homepage at DocSports.com. And basically what it is a great way to give DocSports.com a trial run. Amal, man, I'm telling you, I had mixed reviews last week. I went 4-3 in college and pro combined. I did lose a couple of units because I lost my top play, and those can do damage to that profit week in, week out. I've had a great run of 73% in college since September 1st, 28-13 since September 19th in pro and college combined. But again, last week was one of those things. I was like, yeah, man, I went 4-3. I'd take that every week, but I lost a few bucks. How about yourself?
Yeah, a little bit rough on my top plays. Had two 6-unit plays, one on the UCF, BYU against UCF. That was a pretty easy cover there. Scott, I couldn't believe they were catching points in that spot. For some reason, the odds makers are married to UCF. Once again, a 6.5-point favorite this week. And then I had a tough beat in the Houston-Indy game. Got the Texans laying 5. They've got the ball first and goal, going to at least kick a field goal, maybe go up by 10. Instead, they run a toss play. I didn't know Tony Dorsett was in the backfield instead of Joe Mixon. And so the fumble occurs, and next thing you know, don't end up winning that game, end up winning by 3. But, about 8-9 yards away from just getting out by 10 or kicking a Kaimi Fairbairn field goal and getting that thing up by 6.
I could have used Tony Dorsett a little bit, maybe not the turnovers, but Tony Dorsett overall. That was my top play on Sunday was Dallas. And they
Same
had their
here.
chances, couldn't get it done. I was doing a show on a Friday night. Your old friend Matt Humans, I was doing his show.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that game, and I said, this is my hold your nose game of the week, but the spot is terrific. The injuries to San Francisco, on and on. And I ended up losing that game. So it truly was a hold your nose, top play for me, and it didn't get that. That was a difference between winning and losing as far as units won we're concerned for the week. But it's all about the new week. We'll tell you what we got going a little bit later in the show for this week. Got a lot of plays, got a 7-star going this week, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. Let's jump into some ACC college football action. Them all. Miami hosting Duke. Miami right now a 21-point favorite. The total right around 55. I'll kick it off by saying, I do my lines a week in advance. So before I see any lines at all last week for this week, I'm already making my numbers like Wednesday of last week. And I made Miami 18 points better than Duke on a neutral field. So this line feels about right to me. Miami doesn't have a big home field advantage, as we all know, most weeks. But anyway, the thing is, they 3 of Miami's wins came by a total of 11 points. They were fortunate to escape Cal. They got a great call by the refs against Virginia Tech. And that scares me a little bit. And although Duke came close to SMU last week, what concerns me about this team, they've forced half a dozen turnovers and still found a way to lose by a point. Your thoughts on this game?
I agree with you in terms of looking at this from a Duke perspective. I think Miami's been much more benefactors of some lucky plays. They come back. You mentioned the game against Cal. By the way, I just want to correct one thing you said. The referees in that game against Virginia Tech. No, the league office made the call and said, listen, we need Miami to be undefeated. That was absolutely robbery in terms of what happened in that Virginia Tech game. But I agree with where you're coming out. I'll tell you the other thing, Scott, that concerned me if you're a Miami Hurricanes fan or backer in this particular spot. The game against Florida State, Cam Ward was inconsistent. That's one of my knocks against him, his lack of consistency. And the other thing that bothers me is very cavalier out there. Just doesn't seem to sometimes realize, like, hey, buddy, you got to scoot to the sideline. I'm literally hoping somebody blows him up one of these days going to the sideline because he's so nonchalant. But I just don't think this team is as good as their record indicates, because that Florida State team is bad, and they should have taken them to the woodshed.
Oh, I agree. I'm with you on Duke in this game. I mean, Cam Ward, speaking of him, he's been a little turnover prone of late, not last week, but 3 picks thrown in his previous 2 games before last week. And as we mentioned, Duke can force turnovers. Malik Murphy, I'd like to see him be a little bit more accurate. He's not the most accurate quarterback, but he doesn't throw picks. He's got a nice 17-5 touchdown to INT ratio. I think they can hang around in this game and at least hang that number. Pitt at SMU. SMU 7.5, total 58.5. What a change for SMU. I remember watching their game against the Nevada Wolfpack, and SMU looked like the most overrated team I'd seen in 20 years. And then they make a couple changes on offense. They make the change at quarterback and they catch fire. Now, last week, you got half a dozen turnovers, but you still find a way to lose if you're SMU. Jennings has made the offense better, but he's questionable this week. And that's something that I'm kind of waiting to see what happens here. Pitt gives up a ton of passing yardage, Jamal, as you know. But man, they forced McCord into 5 picks last week, and McCord had been playing well all season long, the Ohio State transfer for Syracuse. But again, if I could lay 7.5 with Smoo, and I could get a healthy Jennings out there at quarterback, I think that's the way to go in this one.
You mentioned it. Preston Stone might be under center for SMU here. I saw something that Pitt Syracuse game, Scott. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. 3 pick sixes, not in a game, in a half. I mean, forget it. I've never seen 3 in a game, let alone in a half. So, actually, you know what? In the Super Bowl, I think there might have been when that Tampa Raiders game might have been only 2. But regardless, I tend to agree with you. I think this team is very capable. People have forgot about SMU with that early loss to BYU, kind of put them on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
But don't look now. They get a win here. They play Clemson. They could be in the ACC championship game. So still a lot of things on the horizon, things going well for them. This is a tough game for me. And Scott, my opinion, this is the best watch of the weekend from a competitive standpoint. I get Ohio State's playing Penn State. It's a better ranked game. But to me, from an entertainment standpoint, you want to watch a good football game with some high-octane offense. Eli Holston, he's a little bit banged up for Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. This should be a fun watch because of what both these teams are capable on the offensive side.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Holstein because he's not elite, but he's very good. And he's very good at the offense. They're running for him at Pitt. So I think it's going to matter quite a bit if he's able to be under center and be his normal self or not due to the injury. And again, I'm gonna go with SMU if we get an update, a positive update on Jennings. I think for me that's the way to go. I remember that win over Nevada up in Reno, and I'm watching that game, and it was the last week of August or first week of September. It was like 50 degrees with the wind chill. There was snow on the mountains. The wind was blowing crazy. SMU hadn't figured out that Jennings was the man for the job yet. They struggled, but they got the win. But they've been pretty good since then and since BYU. Oregon's at Michigan. The Ducks laying 14.5. The total 45.5. I think the total is a little high. Oregon has held all but 2 of their opponents to 14 or fewer points. The only 2 that top that mark are both playoff contenders, Boise and Ohio State. And then Michigan's offense just not that good. I mean, you've got a quarterback room where 4 players, 3 legitimate quarterbacks and a 4th, have thrown a pass for the Wolverines so far this season. They've got 9 interceptions and 8 touchdowns combined. They average 5.6 yards per pass. They're not stretching defenses at all. And they're 124th in total yards per game, 110th in scoring. They turned the ball over. This Oregon defense is fantastic. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've said this before the season began. I've seen more coach for Michigan at an assistant coaching level. I saw him last year when he stepped in for Harbaugh when he was suspended. And I don't like coaches that get so darn emotional where he's crying after a regular season win, stepping in like that for Harbaugh. It's fine behind closed doors. A little too emotional for me. And then I said going into the season, how could they expect this quarterback room to lead them where they want to be them all? This is a bad quarterback room for Michigan. They lost Tuttle now. He's retired from football. And I'm just sitting there thinking, how in the heck is this team going to score more than 10 points? I really think this has like a 27-10 type of look to it. And so the under looks like the way to go for me.
I tell you what, I'm a little bit opposite you on this one in the terms of the total. You bring up some good points with this Oregon defense. They have played extremely well outside of the games against Boise and Ohio State, but no shame in that. You got Genty, who's obviously a Heisman front runner, and then the Buckeyes are very capable offensively. I think in this game, Oregon is going to be able to do what they've done against everybody, which is move the football. And I don't think it'll be that much of a problem. I think the Johnson and Johnson matchup is going to be pretty good between Tez Johnson and Will Johnson from Michigan. But I think Oregon gets out in front by a pretty large margin. And then I think there'll be a turnover possibly from Michigan. I think they're going to be forced to throw a lot more than they want to in this game. I think Oregon wins this game pretty handily. I wouldn't take the Wolverines here, but I don't want to lay 14.5 on the road. But I'm looking towards the over. I think it'll be a little bit higher scoring just because of Oregon's capability of big plays. And I think the second half, we could see the Wolverines in just complete passing mode because their game plan works when you're playing Washington, when you're playing some other teams who don't score as much.
Sure.
But against a team like Oregon, I think it's going to be a challenge.
My biggest worry about that is a pick six or a couple of picks by the Oregon defense that sets up the offense. in a shorter field situation than normal. That's the big thing. I made a prediction before the season Sharon Moore would be gone, if not during season 3, which probably wouldn't happen, but after season 3, with his 3 years that he probably will get at Michigan. Gosh, I just don't see that. You've got Portnoy out there saying he's going to pay $3 million to get a good quarterback to come play for Michigan. And, maybe they can find somebody. And I'm sure there's a lot of kids out there that would take the $3 million no matter where he plays, including at Ann Arbor. But the bottom line is, if he doesn't pull out the wallet and they do something like that, I just think Michigan's in trouble for a couple of seasons. By in trouble, I mean likely 6-6 to 8-4 type of years, by the way. And they're not used to
Well,
that.
to your point, though, the 6-6 is not going to suffice. And I think they are a 6-6 team at best. Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon still on the schedule. This team, they got a good win against Michigan State. Otherwise, they would be below 500.
Hey, listen, as a Nebraska fan, I was hoping we played Michigan this year, and you can see how Nebraska can be all over the place. So, I've never done that in the entire time Nebraska's been in the Big Ten. Boy, I wish Michigan was on our schedule. This was the year. Anyway, having said that, we're in the Big Ten still with Ohio State at Penn State. The Buckeyes laying 3.5 in this one, total 45. And I got to tell you, if Ohio State was healthy up front, I would be on Ohio State in this game. I mean, James Franklin doesn't beat Ohio State. He hasn't beaten Michigan. They struggle against those two teams, and they're bad as an underdog. They're 0-8 straight up, 2-6, and their last 8 as an underdog. But go back and watch Ohio State film against Michigan State and Iowa. First 2 Big Ten games. They ran all over the Iowa Hawkeyes. They ran well against Mich State. 388 yards combined in those 2 games at over 5 yards per pop. But if you take one 53-yard run against Oregon by Travian Henderson out of the mix, the Buckeyes have rushed for 152 rushing yards, 2.4 yards per carry in their other 63 rushing attempts against Nebraska and Oregon. There's one big reason, glaring reason that I can find for this, and that's offensive left tackle Josh Simmons. He got hurt against Oregon in that game. They were running the ball pretty well at the time. They have not been able to find somebody to step up and take the place of Josh Simmons. They're a mess on the left side of the offensive line. That's what scares me off of back at Ohio State so far here.
Scott, I hate to go against my Buckeyes, but you summarized it perfectly. Josh Simmons is a potential first-round pick at left tackle. The San Diego State transfer has done an incredible job. They've got a really good left guard in Donovan Jackson. I'm not sure what they're going to do to be able to shore up that left side there. I think it's going to be a real challenge in this game. I think Penn State has slowly flown under the radar this entire season. We could be looking at a potential 1-2 matchup in the Big Ten championship if it's Penn State and Oregon. This team, Drew Allers, played far better than I anticipated coming into the season. I thought he was their weak link. I love Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton at the tailback position. Warren, to me, has been arguably the best tight end in college football in terms of the Mackey Award. He's been a great pass catcher. I think 3.5 is a tricky number for the Buckeyes on the road. I didn't like the offensive line coming into the season for Ohio State. I had some question marks about Will Howard. Will Howard will have 1 to 2 passes a game, whether his fault or somebody tips the ball. He will give you an opportunity to grab one. Now, he plays well the majority of the time, but that's the concern. I think this is the year Penn State gets over the hump, and I think the pressure mounts on Ryan Day if they lose this game. I don't know if they can still get into the playoff with 2 losses. Probably can, but I'm not sure. But right now, for me, I'd be looking at the Nittany Lions here. I will call this the biggest game in the James Franklin era in State College.
I think Ohio State either loses this week or against Indiana, one or the other. So
I'm with you on Indiana.
Yeah, that would be 2 losses. And if they lose this one and then have Indiana down the road, it'll be interesting to see if Ryan Day can keep the team. It sounds cliche or kind of dumb to say keep them focused, but
yeah,
2
right.
losses,
No, right.
All the pressure's on your shoulders down the road against Indiana a few weeks from now. And also, do you have these guys complete focus if you've lost? I mean, listen, I love Dylan Raiola, the freshman at Nebraska, but if he's a junior with all of his experience at that point, he missed 2 wide open touchdown passes that they ended up not scoring on those drives, one of which was about a 50-yard pass. Guy's 8 yards behind the defense, and he just overthrew him. I mean, that's a game that the Huskers probably should have won, and Ohio State was fortunate to get out of it. So if Allers banged up, you got Bo Pribula, who I thought looked decent last week. The offense actually moved the ball pretty well when he got in the football game against Wisconsin. So I don't think there's a big drop-off there. It's just, can Penn State finally put together a win in a big game that really matters since, James Franklin has been coach? That's what it comes down to. Let's move to the NFL. We got the Cowboys at Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons laying 2.5, total 52. For the most part, I like what Kirk Cousins has done in Atlanta. I mean, you could break it down and see where he's done extremely well against so-so defenses and not so hot against better defenses. But overall, I think Cousins has done well. And I like the way this organization said, we're going with Kirk Cousins. We're gonna spend a high draft pick on a quarterback, that being Penix. Then we're gonna let him learn. And I like that from the Atlanta Falcons. I was not one of those Falcons haters in the draft. I thought it was a good job what they did. But the defense is what I'm concerned with. The Cowboys have fared well against weak defenses. If you go back to last season, they're 6-0, and they actually win by an average score of 36-13 against teams that give up at least 24 points per game on average. That's the Atlanta Falcons this year. I threw in an angle also here, Amal. Cowboys 11-2 against the number with McCarthy as head coach against these teams that allow 24 or more in the second half of the season, Amal. So, I like the Cowboys here. I like the over too, but boy, the Cowboys might make, oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this again. The Cowboys might make my premium card this weekend.
I'm with you, Scott. Look, Atlanta's 5-3. They got 2 wins against Tampa. The first one they should not have won. I thought Tampa Bay mismanaged the game late when they had the ball with an opportunity to add a field goal there. They screwed that up. This Falcons team, Baker Mayfield promptly just decided to throw 2 passes to the Falcon defenders. In his defense, they were open. So he did at least hit the guy from the opposition there. But again, I don't think Atlanta's pass defense gets home enough. I think Dallas is going to have a field day. My issue with, I was with you last week. I was on Dallas as well for one of my plays. And what annoyed me was in that in the fourth quarter on the final drive, they went to CeeDee Lamb on first down, but they never went back to CeeDee Lamb. When you've got your best receiver, and I don't put him in that class of Justin Jefferson and a couple other guys, you still have to go to him. You have to take a chance. If the season's potentially on the line, you got to do it. They're not out of contention. They're 3-4. Packers still have a tough schedule to go. I think they could take a drop. I think Philadelphia could drop off as well. They still have 2 matchups against the Eagles. This is a good opportunity against a poor Atlanta pass defense. Statistically, they're not that bad. They're middle of the pack. They're 18th against the pass in terms of yardage. But I like Dallas here. I think Dallas gets back on track in the Dome. And this is where Dak Prescott became a $60 million man, beating average teams. Dak Prescott can't win a big game. This is not a big game. So I like Dallas.
Yeah, they've been pretty much bullies since Dak has been there. It's like they beat up on the weak teams and they beat them around, knock them around, and then they get their butts kicked by the really good teams of the league. So this is one of those situations where I think the Cowboys get the job done away from home. Interesting matchup here with Denver at Baltimore. We're cutting this, folks, up, by the way, on Wednesday late afternoon. And I saw about an hour before we started doing this video that Baltimore had dropped from 9.5 to 9 across the board, that total in the mid 40s. Now, Denver, they're a couple of plays away from a 6-0 Suats run. They've won 5 of 6. Bo Nix, 8-1 touchdown to INT ratio the last 5 games. He's kind of caught on to what Sean Payton wants to do, and Payton's not asking him to do more than he can. I look at that Baltimore defense. It's bad. They're 29th in opponent passer rating, 25th in yards per play allowed, bad in the red zone. And then Denver's defense is one of the best in the league in the metrics that I just mentioned, where Baltimore struggles. But you got Lamar. He's terrific. They're coming off an unexpected loss. I think we're going to see points put on the board by Baltimore in this game, and I think Denver can do enough to push it over the total.
I hear what you're saying. The one stat for me that really jumps out is Lamar Jackson as a favorite of more than 7 points is 4-15-1 as a starter. Excuse me, 2-15-4. I'm sorry, I confused those numbers. 2-15-4. That's a big number. Scott, this is no team in the NFL blows bigger leads than the Baltimore Ravens. On the flip side, I'm going to make this argument. They've beaten a 2-6 Jets team. They've beaten a Buccaneers team that's had some issues all year long. They've beaten a Raiders team we know that's already on the clock. The Saints have lost, I think, 5 in a row now, or 6 in a row. So some of the victories kind of ring a little bit hollow for me when it comes to Denver. But I think this being over a touchdown, I'd be looking at the Broncos here, no play. No way am I laying this number with Lamar Jackson and company. And by the way, I don't know if it's the yips has affected not just the offense, but it's the defense. Kyle Hamilton had a chance to seal the game last week for Baltimore against the Browns. He drops a game-winning interception. They had a couple of more of those during that game. I would take the Broncos here in the points. And one other thing that nobody's talking about, Justin Tucker is no longer an elite kicker. Forget being the best kicker in the league. He is no longer an average kicker. And I want to see if Baltimore has the stones at the end of this year to make the executive decision to move on from Justin Tucker, because he is missing 50-yard kicks that Butker, Kaimi Fairbairn, the kid in Pittsburgh, They just flat out drill.
A little Freudian slip there of Justin Kicker. He was Justin
Yeah,
Kicker not too long ago, but that's not the
exactly.
case at this point, as you mentioned. I mean, it's a huge drop off from where he was
It is.
over his entire career until this season. Lions at Green Bay is what we're going to wrap it up with here. And then, of course, we'll get to best bets and all that good stuff. But the Lions laying 3.5 here, total 47.5. Amal, Jordan Love has been okay this season, but not like he was over the last half of last year. And he is banged up, and he has been banged up for most of the season, missed a couple of games. He didn't practice today on Wednesday, nursing that groin injury. If he can't go, Malik Willis would get the start. And I've got to say, since coming to Green Bay, since playing for a quarterback-friendly coach like Matt LaFleur, he's actually been one of the top backups in the NFL so far this season. As far as what he did, though, and who he played against, it was Indianapolis, mediocre team, and against Tennessee. Now, we can all sit here and make fun of Tennessee, but the fact is, Tennessee's defense is pretty good. So, that's not like he went out there and beat up on a bad defense. The problem with Tennessee is they've got no offense, and a lot of times that defense gets worn down over the final quarter or so. So Detroit is obviously at another level overall than those teams that Malik Willis has seen. Their offensive line is dominant. They run the ball extremely well, solid through the air, great targets for Goff. I mean, you do have to take into your handicapping, I think, this week that Goff is playing outdoors rather than indoors. There is a difference in his stats when it comes to that. But it's tough to go against these, Amal. Detroit's a 71% cover in the 61 games that Dan Campbell has coached. That's ridiculous. They've covered 8 of the last 10 as road chalk. I'm really interested in what you think about this one because as far as the side, I'm not too sure midweek if I'm going to be involved in this game. So I'm just going to make that pass. I don't want to influence anybody who might be thinking one way or another, but your thoughts on this one?
Square it up. I'm going with the Lions here. You mentioned the situation at quarterback with Jordan Love has been a little bit inconsistent, banged up last game against the Jaguars. This running game has been very effective for them with Josh Jacobs when he's needed to carry the mail over 100 yards last week. But I'll tell you what, Scott, for me, I get the Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated. But the last 5 weeks, the Detroit Lions are the best team in the NFL. I don't think it's
Sure.
really that close. I actually made a play a couple of weeks ago on the Lions to wind up with the 1 seed in the NFC at plus 190. I like where they're at. They already beat Minnesota in a head-to-head. Really, the San Francisco's not the threat. We know Seattle's a fraud. But to me, Detroit, Goff just continues to sizzle. Scott, his last 4 games, he has a ridiculous 13 incompletions.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
most guys in practice couldn't do that. So
Yep.
this team just finds ways. They've got a lot of speed on the perimeter. They know how to use their running game. I really like this team. And I'll tell you what, I have been watching a lot of the Lions post-game locker room. There is a buy-in with this team from Dan Campbell. It's unbelievable. I get Ben Johnson's a great offensive coach, but the
Right.
defense has played well. This team has performed well. I'm not a big fan in terms of division laying points on the road here. I just think Detroit is appreciably a better team. And one other thing I want to add to it, you mentioned the dome, obviously outdoors. We're getting into that area where the weather could be a factor when you go to Chicago and you go to some of these places. But if Detroit manages to get home field advantage, they'll get the bye, 2 games at home in Detroit, and then the Super Bowl is in New Orleans. Goff may never have to step outside again.
Exactly. Boy, I'd like to see a Chiefs Lions Super Bowl. That wouldn't be a bad idea
It'd
the
be
way these
great.
teams are playing. It's funny when you look at a guy like Goff and you mentioned 13 picks, 13 incompletions, all he's thrown over the last several weeks. It's funny between college and pro football handicapping because in college, it's like you got an elite level quarterback or elite level team. That team just usually keeps popping it, man. They just usually keep doing well throughout the course of the season. Maybe one off game during the entire season, but never a complete switch or falling back to the norm. And the NFL is just the opposite. It's like you're just always waiting for teams that are playing well for a couple of weeks to fall off the table or teams playing badly to all of a sudden start playing good, except for the elite teams like Kansas City. And there's not too many of those. But Goff has just been taking care of business 2 seasons now. He's not dropping off. The passing game's been great. And we'll see if it continues this week. Best bets in just a moment. Before we do that, real quick note again about that free $60 account. Click on the link below the video. Get yourself set up for the free 60, which you can use on Amal's daily picks or on my daily picks. Amal, what you got going this week? And then give us your best bet.
Yeah, looking at a couple of college games, to me, this card is not necessarily the best card, but I'll tell you what, there's some sneaky opportunities out there on some teams you may not be paying attention to. And then in terms of the best bet, Scott, we talked about it. I like the total in the Dallas Atlanta game, but I'm going to go
Mhm.
for what me appears to be a safer play. Dallas catching 2.5 here. If it gets the 3, I'd play the +3, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys on the money line. I tend to be a guy, anytime a number's 2.5 or less and I'm on a dog, I play the money line. I like to get the extra value there. You, of course, can get beat in certain spots, but I'll take those chances here. I like Dallas. I think they're the better team. Atlanta, they might as well show up with a ski mask and a gun because they've been perpetrating a fraud all year.
I love it. I'm gonna go. Well, I'll tell you what I got going first this weekend. Gonna have at least 7 plays. I like the college card deep again, probably 5 plays or close to it, and then a couple of plays in the NFL, and potentially 3 plays in the NFL that I'm looking at. So we're looking at anywhere from a 7 to 9 game card. And if you watch my video on Thursday or Friday, you'll be able to see, folks, what I'm doing. I will be in action in all likelihood on Thursday night, so that will be one of the plays this week. It's been a nice run, as I mentioned. 80% since mid-September in college, 73% since the 1st of September. College and pro now, 28-13 going back to September 19th. So 4-3 last week. I did lose a couple of units. We'll look to bounce back unit-wise, not just the record this week. I'm going to go with an over on the Cowboys-Falcons game. And so we're on the same game here. I think the over is the best way to go as far as the games we just talked about for a best bet this week. And you can go back and check out all the reasons if you'd like to. Want to mention also, of course, the NBA is underway, the NHL is underway. And then this coming Monday, we've got college basketball. And can't wait to get started. Finished up March Madness 18-4, and we're looking to get right back into it. So, in fact, I don't know if folks can see it all behind me here, but I got my Creighton Blue Jays hat up back there. So I'm ready to go.
I
Sitting on
saw
top
that.
of a football trophy. I'm ready to go. Let's go Creighton, man. That's my team, along with UNLV. But check out the daily plays each and every day of the week over at DocSports.com. With college basketball coming up, we're going to be extremely busy handicapping and pumping out the plays. For Amal Shah, I'm Scott Spreitzer. We are DocSports.com's Against the Spread. Best of luck, everybody. Let's put them in the win column.